So a couple of days back, my brother sent me a text he had written. I think the first chapter of the book, and he asked for my input when to read it. I should read it and tell him how it feels. And I just did. Might be one of the best things I've read. This is probably you could probably also be looking at it through rose tinted glasses and stuff. But let me read it out to you. Chapter 1. First was the sound of 1,000 whistles. Then then he raised his eyes to the cloudy sky, and behold, arrows rained upon them. His lips curved into another smile, glad this wasn't going to be another monstrous skirmish for a farmer's land as he tightened the grip on the hilt of his sword. Kalag, 5 feet long, an inch thick blade, wide enough for a child to hide behind. Come, he screamed, and his men echoed the cheer as the arrows began to make contact. Athen swung his sword, this weight pulling him further than he had expected, but still it warded off the arrows. He turned his focus to the canyon on the left side of the gorge, tall enough to block what little light the sun managed to shine. And there stood the men who had fired at them. He turned to his men, lifted his blade, and at the top of his lungs screamed, "Charge!" And charge they did. They ran past him and began to climb. He remained behind, measuring the height with his hands, taking a few steps back to give himself space. Then the earth shattered beneath him as he leaped off the ground and crashed into into the canyon wall a few meters from the top, palms digging into the cracks as he hauled his weight with savage intensity until he reached the summit. He jumped over the line of archers and landed right in front of the main Syrian attack line. He let out a breath and rose to his feet to face the Syrian soldiers, but they looked nothing like soldiers. They wore armor and carried weapons, but their stance was poor, hands shaking, terror in their eyes. Something felt off. "Where is your commander?" he asked, staring at the pathetic excuse for a front line. No one answered. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "Answer me!" Then they flinched at the sound of his voice, and the knot tied in his stomach. Something was wrong. The Syrian soldiers had laid siege to the city of Milus, and they were now advancing on the capital. That was the report. Their mission was to slow the army before it reached the gates. Simple enough. But this didn't look like an army. One of them broke from the line with a deafening shriek, blade raised, running at Athen. A laugh shot through him, blood pumping as he counted. Instinct took over. Kalak would be too heavy to use light at this moment, so he spun around instead, smacked the sword from the soldier's hands, pinned him to the ground, unsheathed the dagger and pressed it to his neck. The ease of it was unsettling. He looked back at the canyon's edge. The archers wore a look of relief that shouldn't have been there, what with the men still scaling the wall towards them. He turned back to the soldier beneath him and said, and tears streamed down the boy's face. Barely 16. The helmet on his head barely fits. What was this? He eased off the blade and looked back at the front line. Closer now, and his stomach sank. They were all boys. What kind of sick? "Ah!" the boy screamed, thrusting a knife at Athen. But Athen was faster. Before the blade came close, the boy's throat had already been slit. Blood splashed across Athen's face, blinding him for a moment. He rose, stumbled back, wiped it away, and when he opened his eyes again, he was met with the pale body of the boy, soaked in a pool of his own blood, eyes still holding the fear even as the life behind them had gone vacant. He looked down the line, some on their knees in tears, others staring back with wide, quivering-lipped eyes. His heart felt heavy. The memory of the boy's fearful scream flooded his mind. Breathing felt like a task. He gripped at his chest, shut his eyes, and stumbled back as it played over and over again. Footsteps sounded behind him, and before he could react, Piercing pain shot through him as steel forced his way through his chest. The metallic taste of blood filled his mouth, forcing him to his knees as it poured from the corners of his lips. He looked down at the blade that impaled him, the craftsmanship. The swirling thorns etched into the steel, the way it gleamed in the sunlight. The jagged ends he had watched cut down men so many times. Ashtrek, belonging to thee. I've always wanted to see you like this. The Grand Commander's voice cut through his thoughts. His eyes widened as he turned and saw him standing there in all his glory, wearing a smile Athen had never seen. Sir, he called him weakly. The smile grew as he walked to his front toward him. He walked to the front toward him and crouched before him. He held Athen's jaw and lifted his face so he could look directly into his eyes. Well, yes. Well, isn't this a sight for sore eyes? The Grand Commander said. He released Athen and let his head fall weakly, blood pouring. He snapped his fingers, and one of the men ran to Athen and dragged the blade out. Athen screamed and fell to the floor, writhing in pain, reaching for the wound through his hands, though his hands couldn't reach it. All he could do was bleed out, staring at the feet of the man who had stabbed him, asking himself, why? Sounds began to ruffle, his vision blurred, as he watched the commander wipe the blade with his handkerchief before tossing it aside. The commander walked toward the line of men, and though Athen couldn't hear what was said, he could guess. The commander bowed, and the fear in their eyes eased. In one swipe, and the head of the first boy lifted from his body. Athen's eyes widened as a blood-muffled scream tore from him. Stop! He cried weakly. But he was ignored as the line of men broke apart, fearful screams erupting just as cheers sounded behind him. His men had finally reached the top. A small smile curved his lips. They would stop the commander. They would see him bleeding and put an end to this. But he was wrong. They crossed past him and charged straight at the fleeing men. It wasn't even a fight. It was simply slaughter. Time passed as they moved through the field, making sure every Caesarean soldier was dead. When it was finished, the commander walked back to Athen. He couldn't even speak. His eyes had lost their lights. His heartbeat slowing. He would be dead in minutes. The commander crouched down, a grin across his face. Tell me now, Athen, do you still feel like the strongest? He couldn't have answered even if he wanted to. The next second, he felt a hand wrap around each ankle, dragging him to the edge. His men laughed as they looked down at him. Long live the strongest, they laughed, and threw him off the edge. The world slowed as he watched them grow farther and farther away, his anger building with every stretched out second, until it all went black. So, this was good. This was really good. Probably one of the best things I've read recently. And it feels like it's going to be, it doesn't feel like it's going to be a revenge story. The betrayal aspect of it being set up, because it was clearly a setup. The boys were set up, he was set up, dispose of him. Sounds like the commander was one of those slimy officials that wanted him out the way. I was jealous and wanted him out the way. It was beautiful to read. You could feel the emotions from both the child pressed down that he killed, when the boys felt relief thinking they were saved, the terror he felt, the malice from both the commanders and then his men. It felt like the title of the strongest had come back to bite him, and the title of the strongest had made him hated amongst his peers, his men. I want to read more. I really want to read more. And this might be me talking through rose tinted glasses, obviously, being That's my brother wrote it, and it might also be recency bias, but it feels like one of the best things I've read recently. Do you still feel like you're one of the strongest? That that line. Anyway, please let me know how you what you think. How did this come off to you? Did you like it? Did you like me reading out? What notes do you have? Do you have any? Because he's definitely going to be in the comments. Do you like? Did you notice anything you want to point out? Maybe any writing things you want to, any thoughts you want to give? Please let me know. And on to the next one. Bye bye. Do you still feel like you're the strongest?